Let's talk about hojaldra, that great big flat crispy pastry from the Yucatán. It's a little bit like an empanada, but much bigger and flatter. And when you want to tackle it at home, you first have to decide what you're going to use for the dough to make it. And you can go to the grocery store and buy some puff pastry. I always recommend that you buy the all butter one because it's got the best flavor. Or you could tackle puff pastry at home. Now, if you want to really do it up right, that's going to take a couple of days, and it's a much longer involved process than what I'm going to show you, which is kind of a rough puff pastry. It's just sort of like making pie dough. So the first thing that we're going to do is to measure out a couple of cups of flour. I'm using an unbleached flour here. I think it works really well for this particular one. 2 cups will go in. Okay, now we'll put that away and add some salt to it. 3/4 of a teaspoon, that should be about right. And now to the water, I need 2/3 of a cup of very cold water. Okay. Now the next step is to take a small amount of our butter, put it into the food processor, put the lid on, and pulse it several times. When that is pretty well incorporated, I'm going to add the rest of the butter here. And this is where things go differently than making regular pie crust. I'm going to put the top on and I'm only going to pulse it a few times. 3 times about a 1-second pulse. Drizzle on half of the water. Pulse it once. Drizzle on the second half of the water and pulse it a couple of times. But you'll see it's not really a dough yet. It hasn't all come together. So I'm going to take the top off and just dump this out onto the work surface here. Scrape that all out there. Now we have to turn this into our rough puff pastry. So I'm going to just work in some of the little bits of unincorporated flour and then press it out. And now I want to use a rolling pin to help me roll it out into a rectangle that's about 20 inches long and about 10 inches wide. A little more flour on the top. Now, it's still kind of a ragged looking piece of dough, but I'm going to make sure it's free on the bottom, and I'm going to take 1/3 of it and fold that over the middle here. This is where we're going to start to make those little thin layers of butter that will separate the flour water dough that we have working here. The bottom part comes up and then press it out. So we flattened out some of those pieces of butter already, but now we're going to flatten them out even more by taking it on the side like this and rolling it up. This gets pressed out now, so it's a little bit like a sausage or a jelly roll that you're rolling up there. And there we have our rough puff pastry, very quickly made. It just needs to sit in the refrigerator wrapped in plastic for about 3 hours for it to firm up. While the pastry is chilling, let's move on to the filling. Now, in typical fashion in Yucatán, it would be a savory filling of cheese and ham with a sprinkling of sugar over the top of it. Today, we're going to go all sweet, and it's going to be a combination of cheeses, but with quince paste or with guava paste. So the combination that I like to put in the inside of this starts with some cream cheese, and then add to that a couple of ounces of goat cheese. You could use all cream cheese for this if you would like. And lastly, a little bit of ricotta cheese. Now the ricotta cheese is the hand-dipped ricotta. It's the firmer one. It's not the sort of juicy one that you oftentimes see in the grocery stores. So all of that goes in there. For flavorings, a little bit of zest of orange and some black pepper. Again, sort of tipping our hat toward the traditional savory aspect of the fillings for hojaldras in the Yucatán. Now, you can find a lot of quince paste these days in specialty grocery stores. It's actually become quite popular. Or if you go to the Mexican grocery stores, you can find a lot of guava paste as well as quince paste available. I'm gonna just take this one out of its container and then start slicing it thinly. After the dough had chilled for 3 hours, I cut it in half, and then I rolled out each half into a rectangle about 10 inches by 13 inches. Then I laid one of those pieces of rolled out dough onto a cookie sheet lined with parchment. Then I pulsed those filling ingredients in the food processor until they were thoroughly combined, and then spread them out over the rolled out dough, leaving about an inch all around uncovered. Then I topped it with the quince paste. Next is to crack an egg into a small dish and then beat it until it's completely liquidy. Brush that beaten egg around the edges, then drape the other piece of dough over the top of the hojaldra. Roll and press the seams together, enclosing that cream cheese filling. Then seal the edges using the tines of a fork. Lastly, brush it with a light coating of the egg wash and cut long slits across the top to let out steam during the baking. Now, to continue the savory, sweet flavors of this dish, mix a little salt into the sugar topping that you're going to sprinkle over the crust. This goes into a 400-degree oven, bakes about 10 minutes. Then I'm going to lower the temperature to 350 degrees and cook it until it's completely crispy through. That should take about 40 minutes more. Now, for the unveiling here. Hear that crackly, crispy crust? Looks great.